Skirk is out, and to make this guide, I watched videos about her, browsed Reddit posts, and checked Theorycrafter's Google Sheets to summarize all of that information into this video to help you build her. So first, let's go over her kit. This is my attempt at explaining it to someone who knows absolutely nothing about it. You can actually split it up into two different playstyles, her primary one being an on-field DPS, and the other one being a burst nuke. It's important to note that both her elemental skill and elemental burst have two different versions. You can either tap or hold the skill button, and the version of her burst is dependent on if you tap or hold the skill button. In place of energy to elemental burst like most characters, Skirk uses a resource called Serpent Subtlety. You'll see how much of this resource you have in place of where your burst charge normally is. Skirk uses Serpent Subtlety in her kit, and you can gain more of it. You by default start with 45 Serpent Subtlety when you tap or hold the skill button. Her first ascension passive is when anybody in your team triggers any cryo reaction, with the exception of melt, a void rift will be created on the ground. You can spawn one every 2.5 seconds, and only 3 can exist at once. Skirk can consume these void rifts to gain 8 Serpent Subtlety each, and she has a few different ways of absorbing them, which I will go over later. When you tap your elemental skill button, Skirk will enter her 7-phase flash mode. This is her on-field DPS playstyle. She gains 45 Serpent Subtlety, gains Cryo Infusion on her attacks, does more damage, and gains resistance to interruption. While in 7-phase flash mode, she consumes 7 Serpent Subtlety per second. Running out of Serpent Subtlety or swapping out of Skirk takes you out of this mode. Skirk can be in this mode for a maximum of 12.5 seconds, and she can absorb Void Rifts to gain 8 Serpent Subtlety each, either by charge attacking them or using her burst. In 7-phase flash mode, her burst turned into a special version, which consumes no Serpent Subtlety, absorbs the Void Rifts, and gives Skirk a buff to her next 10 attacks. Note that this special version of the burst does no damage, it simply absorbs Void Rifts and gives Skirk a buff. So to simplify it, her on-field DPS playstyle starts with using her supports to generate 3 Void Rifts, and then you tap the elemental skill button to go into her 7-phase flash mode. You then use your elemental burst to absorb the void rifts and gain a buff, and in doing so you gain more Serpent Subtlety. You then keep normal attacking until more void rifts spawn, and then charge attack to absorb those void rifts, and then keep normal attacking until the duration runs out. So for her burst nuke playstyle, you want to hold the elemental skill instead. When you hold it, Skirk gains 45 Serpent Subtlety and starts moving quickly, in a state similar to Yolan's skill or Arlecchino's dash. In this state, you gain resistance to interruption, and you will absorb any nearby void rifts. While in this mode, if you have at least 50 Serpent Subtlety, you can use Skirk's normal elemental burst, which does a huge amount of AoE cryo damage. So since you start at 45 Serpent Subtlety and need 50 to trigger her burst, you will need to absorb Void Rifts by holding E, and absorbing these Void Rifts will give you Serpent Subtlety above 50 to use her burst. The amount of damage this burst does is increased for every Serpent Subtlety you have over 50 for a maximum of 12, so that the damage increase caps at 62 stacks. Using this burst will also consume all of your Serpent Subtlety and will take you out of the dash mode. For her rotation in this mode, you want to use your supports to generate 3 Void Rifts, hold the elemental skill button on Skirk to absorb the Void Rifts, and then burst to do the damage, and then swap back to your supports. Her fourth ascension passive is whenever a Hydro or Cryo party member other than Skirk deals Hydro or Cryo damage, Skirk gains a buff called Death's Crossing for 20 seconds. Each character can only give 1 stack for a maximum of 3 stacks. So for example, Brina can only ever give 1 stack of Death's Crossing to Skirk. If I want the other 2 stacks, I'll need 2 other Hydro or Cryo characters that deal Hydro or Cryo damage. So I can use someone like Escoffier. These stacks increase her damage in 7-phase flash mode and her burst nuke damage. At 3 stacks, you get 170% more damage in 7-phase flash mode and 160% more damage with her burst. If you compare this with 2 stacks, they only give you 120% and 115% more damage respectively. So you can see that you really want to play Skirk in a full Hydro and Cryo team so you can get 3 stacks of Death's Crossing for the maximum benefit. And then her utility passive increases your entire party's elemental skill level by 1 if your party is either Hydra or Cryo and you have at least one of each. You can start to see a pattern with Skirk's teams here. I will quickly add that in Spiral Abyss, you start with max Serpentility, so you can burst first and then go directly into the 7-phase flash mode and on-field DPS as normal. For leveling up talents, you want to prioritize the skill or burst depending on whatever playstyle you want to do, and you can leave the normal attacks under leveled because your damage in 7-phase flash mode is considered skill damage, so it will only increase if you level up the skill. Constellations, her C1 summons an additional blade that does 500% of Skirk's attack for every Void Rift she absorbs. Her C2 basically increases the amount of Serpentility you get when using the skill from 45 to 55, makes her damaging burst do more damage, and makes her do more damage in 7-phase flash mode. C3 is the standard 3 levels on the burst. C4 increases her A4 passive numbers, making her do more damage. C5 is the standard skill 3 levels. And C6 gives her a new resource called Havoc Sever Stacks, which you gain 1 of whenever you absorb a Void Rift. These stacks are consumed in 3 different ways. When you use your damaging burst, it does more damage. When you're on field DPS in 7-phase flash mode, your 3rd and 5th hit will do more damage. And when you're in 7-phase flash mode, if you take a hit, that hit will do less. I'm just going to leave here a calculation of the damage increase each constellation level gives you. Credit to Meowtews for the calculations. And on the left side, it assumes you're using the artifact set Finale of the Deep Galleries, and on the right side, it assumes you're using the artifact set Martial Sea Hunter. In terms of weapons, her signature is obviously the best. Some other 5-star swords are also good, but if you're looking for a good free-to-play option, the best one is Finale of the Deep, which is a craftable sword from Fontaine. I'm gonna leave calculations here of which weapons are the best, but these calculations assume for an on-field DPS playstyle. These calcs were done by Meowtews again. I'll leave the link to the sheet in the description below. For artifacts, you basically have 2 options: Finale of the Deep Galleries and Martial Sea Hunter. There is a bit of a debate whether which is better for her, but the TLDR summary is that Martial Sea Hunter is better if you're using Skirk with Farina, and Finale of the Deep Galleries is better if you aren't using Farina. For the main stat on your sands, you want attack percent, and for the goblet, you want cryo damage or attack percent. The difference between cryo damage and attack percent is pretty small, and what's better for you depends on a lot of factors. If you want the simple answer, I'd choose whatever has better substats, but the longer answer is that if you're using C2 Farina, attack percent is probably better. If you have Skirk's signature weapon or Skirk Constellations, cryo damage is probably going to be better for you. And for the circlet, you want crit rate or crit damage. Substats that you want to prioritize are crit and then attack. Note that energy recharge is a completely useless stat on her because Serpentility is the replacement to her energy. For teams, you'll notice that you really want to play Skirk with only Hydro and Cryo units. If you can, you really want to use Farina and Escoffier. Your 4th slot can be any one of Shenhe, Yelan, Stitlali, Mualani, or Mona. If you're missing Farina but have Escoffier, you can replace her with any of the 5 stars I just mentioned. And if you're missing Escoffier but have Farina, you can either use Farina with another Hydro or Cryo healer, or you can leave Farina out of the team, which saves you having to use a healer. The difference between these 2 teams is pretty small, so the pick is up to you. If you don't have any of those options, Xingqiu, Rosaria, Layla, Dahlia, or Chongyun are pretty good 4-star alternatives. And if you don't have enough of those units to make a full team, honestly just use any Hydro or Cryo units that you have, making sure that you have at least one of each in your party, because for the most part her kit really demands that you follow that rule. One last thing I want to touch upon is you might have seen online some discourse about if Skirk is worth it without Escoffier, and the harsh truth is that without Escoffier, Skirk is gonna do around 40% less damage than if you did have Escoffier. And yeah, that does kind of suck that Skirk is super restrictive, but it's just something to consider if you're still on the fence about Skirk and somehow made it this far in this video. Again, I'll leave a link to the calculations in the description below. Thank you to Meowtews for doing the calculations, and I hope you learned something new, and if you did, consider subscribing. Thanks.